We are live. Welcome to the Shared Parenting Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing Erica Sawyer, and we are talking about a really cool topic, HSPs. So first, I would love for you to introduce yourself, and then if you wouldn't mind defining what on earth an HSP is or what that means for the folks that don't know, and then maybe some of the just a little bit of the experiential piece for those that know that HSP means highly sensitive person, but maybe haven't had the experience.
Sure. Okay. So to introduce myself, I'm a licensed mental health counselor and art therapist working in private practice up near the Seattle area. And I specialize in working with highly sensitive people and empaths. That's my area of focus, what I'm passionate about, and like helping them break through the chronic anxiety that can sometimes just be a part of being a highly sensitive person in a world that doesn't support that. So high sensitivity is, so let's see. Essentially, Dr. Elaine Aron coined the term in, I think it was 1996. Her research started in like 91 around introversion. And then she realized, oh, there's something different going on here. And so high sensitivity is referring to having a highly sensitive nervous system. So like a more active brain mirror neuron system, more activated insula in the brain. So really, she talks about sort of four main characteristics that define the trait. And that's depth of process, what the acronym does, DOES, depth of processing, overstimulation, like the empathy and emotional reactivity, and then sensory sensitivity, or sensing the subtle. And really it's the overstimulations that's like the Achilles heel, or that like causes the issues with high sensitivity or challenges, we'll say. She's found that this trait is a genetic temperament trait that's been found in roughly 20% of the population. It's not a disorder, it's not a disease or a diagnosis. It's a genetic temperament trait. And I think, do you have any questions about that, or do you feel like that kind of...
I think that does describe it pretty well. I think, I mean, my brain is like buzzing. I remember reading, gosh, I'm going to mess up the titles, but there was like highly sensitive person, and then I think highly sensitive parent was a separate book, right? Something like that. And then highly sensitive child was... It's interesting because you had mentioned that the overstimulation becomes sort of an Achilles heel. And what I was thinking when you said that is, and I bet we sort of Achilles heel ourselves in shaming the depth of our own emotions, right? So it's like if we're living in the world and we're feeling things really deeply and we're experiencing that sensitivity, and then we're like, oh, what's wrong with me? That ends up hurting us when there's nothing wrong with us. This is just how we experience the world. But then little kids, not knowing what's happening, probably get overwhelmed even more than adults. Is that what you see in your practice?
Yeah, and that's like a really important, even so, the adults that come to me, because I work with adults in my practice, you would not believe the number of them that, I mean, and myself included in the past, like the messages are like, what's wrong with me? I feel broken. I feel like an alien. I feel just all of these, like defective is another word that comes up a lot. And that's absolutely not the case. And the more you have an understanding around your nature, and the more you connect with others who are like you, the more you realize, oh, all of these things that I am and that I'm experiencing are absolutely normal, and I'm not alone in this experience. And so it's been I have a child who is highly sensitive. Definitely, some things, brain differences, and I see so many similarities and differences, because no HSP is like every other HSP. So it's like my goal to make sure he does not grow up thinking, even though he's in a world that might be giving him those messages, because surely that's, whether it's intentional or not, that's just sort of what happens.
Mm-hmm.
My goal is to make sure that he knows, this is all, you're normal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want everyone who comes to me. You're normal.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. And I think that's why Sure Parenting aligns so well with what you're doing in your practice, because when we're looking at a family and we're specifically in my work addressing the child, we're not looking at them from a place of deficit and problem. We're looking at who is this unique little being and how do we best support them? And sometimes that means, to me, broadening our definition of what we think normal is and kind of understanding where some of those ideas of normal came from. I think that we are, in many cases, the first generation that is practicing tolerating big feelings and emotions instead of just suppressing them.
right.
And that can feel like we must be doing something wrong if we were raised in a way that was very much not the case. Likely because our parents were raised in a way where that was very much not the case, and so on and so forth. Especially if you combine, I'm trying to be more tolerant, help you learn how to process your feelings, help you understand what's happening in your brain. Mm-hmm. And also you're highly sensitive on top of that. I think as parents, it can be a challenge to not start to internalize that a little bit. And then the fact that it's largely genetic means that probably one of you is also highly sensitive. So as a highly sensitive parent, how has this distinction helped you to approach getting the accommodations that you need in your motherhood specifically? And maybe backing up, how did you even find out you were an HSP? That's actually maybe the first step.
Oh, goodness. Well, I actually don't have a memory on when I found out, but I knew I found out in my 20s because I came across a box full of papers from that time, and I had Xeroxed the highly sensitive, like the test out of her book, which jogged my memory. Oh, I had got that from the library, or someone gave it to me. I don't know. And we were using Xerox machines. No, and so it was in my awareness, but like it was around, we'll say like mid 30s when, and I'm 47 now. Let's tell everyone my age. I'm an older mother, but that's when I really just started to dive in, because I was also came across the term empath. And so I was like researching them both and how did they relate? How are they different? If they were different, all of this. And there's just all this debate out there.
Oh, for sure.
The two. So, okay. And so knowing, I guess, having sort of deep dived into that, and then working when I went into my counseling program and then started seeing clients, and just seeing that so many of the folks who needed help were somewhere, like a lot of them were, I would say, highly sensitive, and I was able to attune to them and like help them in ways sort of intuitively that maybe some others couldn't. And I think even in her book, she mentions that about 50%, I don't know if it was 50% or the majority of, but a large number of clients that come to therapy are highly sensitive.
That kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like the world is overwhelming. Help me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and then how that's sort of really, it's been this journey of understanding my nature, understanding my needs, and then throw motherhood on top of that. And it's like, you really need to take care of your needs now.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. And I mean, and it was like, because came into the world during the pandemic. The support systems were lower. Like we were sort of isolated, the two of us, my husband and I, with our brand new child.
Yeah.
And had to really with very little sleep make it work. And
Mhm.
so, where was I going with this?
Just how you learn to accommodate yourself
Oh,
and
yes,
motherhood.
I was noticing a lot more anxiety in my
Mm.
experience than normal, and I realized in the way that that was bleeding over into my mother. I was not being present in the way I wanted to be, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and so that's when the commitment came in. Like, I have to take care. I have to figure this out, and I have to take care of myself in order to really fully be there for
Good.
raising this little child that needs me to be my fullest self.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I would say all of the things that were true before he came or became more true. Like, and so Elaine Aron talks about finding your tribe, or like one of the key elements to thriving as an HSP is having at least a small circle of people who really get you and support you and understand you.
Mhm.
And so I would say one of the key things, if we're talking strategies for highly sensitive parents, is to enlist and allow yourself to have a village to support you. Like, you really have to ask for help. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you're one of those lucky folks that just that get offered and handed the help. But we tend to not want to be a burden or not want to impose all of these things. So learning to sort of let go of the belief that you have to do it alone first off,
Mhm.
and then that would even be a normal thing to do it alone
No.
when we are a society. We're very human and we need that connection. So
Mhm.
and then just like letting go of all the guilt that comes with asking for help or accepting it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a process in the beginning. When we finally had like a part-time nanny come in, like maybe 15 hours a week, all the hours in the beginning, I just slept. Like, I just
Mhm.
needed those to sleep. But then there were the times that I was awake. I'm like, oh, well, then does she really need to be here? That I should be with him if I'm not needing to sleep. You just have to sort of let go of the guilt and the
Yeah.
unrealistic expectations that you have to do it by yourself.
And I think this is another opportunity to look at, where did this expectation come from? And it's not biologically normal. Humans have always been social and community oriented, and we've never had to do parenting alone. At the very least, we had like grandmas and aunties and sisters and cousins. And before that, we had full tribes.
Right.
The children were everyone's children. We
Yeah.
all worked together. And the idea that now we're supposed to put the entire burden of child rearing on one single individual, and they're supposed to do it without sleep, with looking fabulous,
Yeah.
without ever having a meltdown, without ever feeling overwhelmed. It's not human.
Right.
Humans need to be able to acknowledge whatever their upper limit is, then take 3 steps back and start asking for help then. We shouldn't have to wait till the very breaking point before we say, "Hey, help would be good. It would be good here."
Yeah.
And I'm on a mission to help more moms recognize that,
I
um,
love
because I do. And help can mean so many things. I noticed this yesterday. I went on a hike, and taking my 3 kids by myself on a hike feels incredibly overwhelming to me. There's just so much to manage. My anxiety goes through the roof. I have to be responsible for everything. So
it.
for me, in that instance, help isn't somebody else doing the things, it's somebody doing it with me. It is
Mhm.
another adult. It is a nervous system co-regulation just happening in the background, where we're both like, we've got this. It'll be fine. We both have food. We both have water. Like, there is a camaraderie and a community in that makes it flow so much better and makes it a much more enjoyable experience. And I think maybe that can be a little bit of a baby step. If you're like, I'm not ready to have somebody maybe come nanny my child, like, could you have another mom come over and just like do life with you a little bit?
Yeah.
Like, would that be helpful? Maybe.
Mhm.
um, and then start to practice. Be like, I'm gonna run upstairs for like 30 minutes.
Mhm.
You're good? Okay, great. and practice giving yourself that little bit of breathing room.
Yeah.
And see, like, no, just notice, don't judge it. Just notice, how does it feel? We'll notice the anxiety. But other than that, what else is there? Is there peace? Is there your body's muscles like unclenching a little bit so that you can like sink down? Is there more? Like, is it that you need to put on music to kind of drown out the kids playing that's like triggering your guilt? Is it that you need a heated blanket? Is it that you need to get in the shower? I loved when I was like a tween. I would get in the shower and I'd plug my ears and it would sound like a waterfall like going over my head.
Yeah.
I loved that sound. It like drowned out everything else.
Yeah.
And it's like this, I don't know what that is, but it's good.
It's soothing to you. And you have this space to sort of discover or rediscover or just find out what is it that I need and what can I give myself or make sure I can, work into my day somehow.
Yes. And then as we collect all these little things, the more that we notice and the more that we collect, the more options we have. So the more we feel like powerful instead of powerless, like we have choice, we have options, we have many a possibility during times that are kind of stressful and overwhelming. And I'm wondering if you have experienced in your family, as you've claimed this distinction for yourself, this would you call it a neurotype? You said personality.
It's a genetic temperament trait, so would fall under like a personality.
Okay, so the genetic temperament trait. If you're claiming that and you're explaining that to your husband, to your child, he's little still, but eventually, do you find that they become more cognizant of your needs as you advocate for yourself?
Yes. And I think it's like, and they don't necessarily even have to understand it, but the clearer you get on speaking up for what you need, the more, the person who's trying to support you can do it. Like, so for example, my husband knows that on car rides, if the music is too loud or it's like too rocky for like, or metal, whatever, like for too long, which is a few minutes for me, I'm going to ask for it to be turned down if he doesn't turn it down, so he's become more aware, like, oh, when mom's in the car, when I'm in the car, that it can be on certain stations that we can all enjoy and not the ones that like get my nervous system like all frazzled and irritated. I'm like, but I had to learn that. Like I had to pay attention, like what is going on and why is this happening? And then before it was just like, I would just like, turn the music down, whatever. And now it's like, oh, it's going to happen. So I'm going to get irritable really fast. Like, can you turn it down or change the station? So that's just like a little example of one area that he knows how to support me in, because I've realized what it was and articulated what it could be.
And I think the more we model that, the more that our kids can learn that for themselves too.
Yes.
I think that's one of the things I sometimes will talk to, usually little kids. I don't talk to them. Like it's kind of going through their parents. But I would say like 12-year-olds and stuff, sometimes their parents are like, they kind of don't want to listen to me. Will you talk to them? And if the child is okay with it, I'll let them come in and chat with me, with the parent there.
Yeah.
And there is this moment of, oh, when I'm explaining their nervous system is trying to protect them, and certain things to their nervous system will feel threatening, like really loud music or really persistent sounds, just like over and over and over again. Yep. And it doesn't have to make sense. It's not our job to make other people agree with what our nervous system is saying. We get to go, oh yeah, my nervous system is going, So what do we need to do in that situation? Where is our personal power? Is it in turning down the music? Is it in putting on noise canceling headphones? Is it in, depending on what you're doing? Like sometimes it's stuff like the noise canceling headphones irritate like the pressure on my head. I'm like, okay. Also, this other kid has to like hum to regulate to be able to focus. So like, this is complicated.
Yeah.
We love the Flare audio inserts and the loop ones too. But even other things like chewing on ice, which I know is not like technically the greatest thing, but it creates its own noise. And that can give your brain a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
And then there's the proprioceptive input from your jaw that for at least one of my kids is like Xanax. It's like, oh, I feel so much better now.
So I remembered you talking about this before, and that has helped me allow my son to chew ice, because I know in his own way, it's like helps his nervous system and it helps regulate him and he calms down. So it's like, okay, if you're going to crunch away,
yeah,
we try to do a little crushed ice instead of, anyway.
I do think crushed ice or like the Sonic ice ones are a little bit softer. My husband cringes a smidge because he loves teeth and dental hygiene and health, and it makes him nervous. And
understandably,
right, it's like totally understandable. And sometimes we're weighing like what is going to help each kid in my family. There's 3 of them. Regulate their nervous systems without deregulating somebody else's. But we love jewelry. We have Arc Therapeutics is one of my favorite brands. They have a ton of like food grade silicone things. There's stuff you can put on the end of your pencil. There's necklaces, different textures and shapes. One of them is shaped like a Lego, so you can like pick at it with your teeth at the little bobs on top. Tons of stuff like that. And so we experiment. It's an ongoing life experiment. My daughter found out, she's 5, and I was trying to figure out why she was so like towards the end of the night. And, from a biological perspective, is there histamines going on? Is there something like that? But also from a sensory perspective, how much sensory input has she had? She doesn't love bedtime. There's a separation. There's some anxiety. Yeah. But also the days that she's not had enough sensory input, she is like seeking it. So she's getting loud. She's getting aggressive. And I put aggressive in quotes because what she's really looking for is proprioceptive input. And so I got her big full-size carrots to chomp on for last snack, and it was her favorite thing. It's like, I get to grrr, is how she said it. And I was like, I love this for you, because now we know, and you can advocate for yourself that, oh, this is what I'm needing, that feeling, that overwhelm, that manic kind of sensation in your body. Now you have a place to point it, to advocate for what you need, so that you can kind of downshift getting ready for bed. And I also feel like I need to say the goal isn't always to have a super calm child. The kids have energy and they get to be wild and big and use their whole body. And we get to create scenarios where that's great. Like yesterday when we were climbing mountains. And then when there's that energy mismatch, then we can help them find the tools to help themselves maybe calm down for bed or regulate in a classroom. I know that's a big factor for a lot of families. Do you find that HSPs struggle in school the way that, say, like an ADHD student might? Or are they so attuned to their teacher and their moods that they're usually more masking?
That's a really great question. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of some therapists I know who work with highly sensitive children, because I know that sometimes, sometimes a highly sensitive child can present or be misdiagnosed with ADHD, and it's not necessarily because they meet the criteria for it. It's like, for example, because of the sensory overstimulation, maybe the bright lights or too many kiddos moving around, or like you said, repetitive sounds of someone's tapping their pen over and over. If there's too much going on that their nervous system's trying to take in and process, it can make it very hard to concentrate and focus on anything. So they're more distractible and more, they're not able to like have the focus. But like get my son at home away from all of that, and he has an amazing amount of focus.
Mm.
I mean, people have even commented on like, oh, for a 4-year-old, wow, he's really like staying engaged with that task for a long time, you know? So I've already forgotten what the question was,
No,
but
I think you're answering it though. It was sort of just comparing, because I will get a lot of parents who are like, my kid is struggling in school. How do I help them? And so sometimes ADHD comes up as a diagnosis that child has, and I'm just wondering how many kids that are sensitive in nature are experiencing school. It's really overwhelming, and it's not necessarily ADHD, but it's still addressing their nervous system and helping to support their nervous system in this environment that maybe isn't really set up for them.
right. And I think so. I know there's a lot of different opinions around this, but if I sort of zoom back and I look at the umbrella of neurodivergence,
Mm-hmm.
like ADHD, autism, I believe high sensitivity falls under that, as do many experts in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Some do not. Um, what is it, like synesthesia? They're
Dyslexia, I've heard, and like OCD sometimes I've heard lots of things.
so yeah, you can have more than one thing going on. So it's not like, you know, for example, you may be a highly sensitive person with autism and ADHD.
Yeah.
What really matters, I think, is what is it for you as a unique individual that is going to help, and how do we find what that is?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in environments like school systems or classrooms, work, you know, so many HSPs will find themselves to more solitary roles or become entrepreneurs because the work environments are just so difficult to be in.
Yeah.
Or in any sustainable way. So yeah, I forget where I was going with this too, but essentially just having an awareness that because there's tending to the inner environment and what you have control over, and then there's also being aware of, does this outer environment, the environment I'm physically located in, support me?
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't, are there ways that we can help shape that to support me? Or are there ways that I can adjust, like wearing the loops when I go into a movie theater to like dampen the sound, but still be able to enjoy the movie? So I feel like, and there's just so much trial and error. Like you said, it's like this grand experiment with you and your kiddos, trying to find what works.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like not one solution for everyone, but I think there are some broad like things that just would apply.
So I'm hearing from you, broad wise, sleep, super important, noise protection of some kind, whether that's turning it down, wearing something covering your ears, inside your ears, something that helps it so there's not so much noise in your brain. What other things have you found to be supportive of you in your motherhood as an HSP?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is just having routines.
Okay.
Like simple, because, well, and I think this applies to anyone when the nervous system, we're sort of wired for, well, HSPs in particularly are wired like that fight, flight, freeze thing. Because of our more activated amygdala and nervous system, we are more attuned to potential threat, and so we'll often see our nervous system will respond to threats that are not threats as if it's a survival thing.
Yeah.
So and things that are unknown or unexpected feel like a threat. So if you can have routines, that's known, that establishes a sense of safety to the nervous system. just sort of knowing what to expect. So there's just less activation of that response with the unknown.
That totally makes sense.
So, yeah, and I found that for me personally and for my child, having, and I'm not talking routines like rigid, things have to be this way and we brush our teeth at this time and whatever. I'm talking having some general structure or things that we know are going to happen, even if we sort of deviate. I mean, we are constantly shifting what wind down or bedtime looks like, but there's a general structure around it and a general time it starts, and his body, that helps him. It helps me too, like just to feel safe in the whole process. Like, okay, even if this isn't going great, I know we're going to get through it. And yeah, there may be some meltdowns or resistance and whatever, but we always eventually get to bed.
Yeah.
Eventually get to sleep.
It will happen eventually.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think, you touch on something that's so important for parents to realize. And I end up talking about this in group coaching a lot with the littles. Our brains want to predict. We are prediction machines all the time. But we want to predict what's happening next, what's happening next, what's happening next. And that creates a sense of predictability and safety there as a result. Little kids are not great at predicting things. And they also lack theory of mind. So they think you think the same thing that is in their head. So when they see the green cup, they don't comprehend that your brain is different and see something else. The green cup is in my awareness. Therefore, that is all that is in anyone's awareness ever. And their prediction is that they're going to have that green cup at snack. And then they get to snack and it's not there.
Yeah.
And there's this mismatch moment of like, it almost like if you're stepping down the stairs and you miss a step, there's this, like, what just happened? I mispredicted. I failed my prediction. And that little jolt of discomfort for a typical kid might be whining. But for an HSP, when they're already tired and they've already been exhausted all day from using their resources to manage overstimulation, it might be a full-blown meltdown.
Yeah.
And then the parent's like, okay, it's a cup, dude. It's not the cup. It is my sense of safety has been shaken and I don't even know how that happened. And I'm tired and this was the final straw. And so as crazy as it may sound, soothing that child's nervous system and helping them to feel safe again is going to help them come through that dysregulation. And it might even provide feedback to the parent of, okay, maybe that's a question I incorporate into our routine. Which color cup are you picking tonight? And it's like, it's not about giving into the tantrum. There's quite a difference when you're talking about a sensory overwhelm experience for a little kiddo.
Right.
But it is about helping them to have enough appropriate power and control in their world. And the safety that brings, even us. Like the fact that I get to make the decisions in my life makes me feel much better. And we underestimate how little our kids really do get to control. So when we have the ability to give them a little bit of power and control, that can be really helpful. Or I've had some families eliminate the entire thing by having one color of everything, right? Where there's less ability to make a mistake in those predictions because it's so much more predictable. And I don't think there is a right or a wrong. I think it's a big giant experiment. We get feedback constantly and then we decide what works for our families.
Yes. You articulate things so well. You're just such a great teacher.
Oh, thanks.
Yes. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, one of the things that I will do, is to sort of give them a little heads up about things. So I will talk about what's going to happen or mention it. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to put this, I'm trying to think of an example in the moment. But I just sort of narrate things a lot. And I've done that ever since he was little to now. And it helps him to sort of, like you said, that space that sometimes it doesn't necessarily help, but a lot of times it does. It gives him this sort of, okay, I know that this is going to be different than I was thinking it's going to be, or there's a shift or a transition coming up. And, but I found ways to sort of say it, like, not like, okay, after you finish that drawing, we're going upstairs to brush your teeth. It's more like, oh, as soon, you know, as when I'll comment on whatever it is when that's completed, I wonder if we can race up the stairs to get to whatever the
Uh-huh.
next. I don't even talk about the brushing teeth yet. I just want to get him up the stairs
Yeah.
to the
Right.
bathroom.
So taking that big goal and narrowing it to a smaller
Yeah.
one that leads in that direction. That's
Yeah.
smart. That's a good strategy.
Yeah. And there was something else as you were talking that I was thinking, oh yeah. Um, oh, the power and control. So that's another area, like I'm trying to, the more I find I give him that, and like the little things that don't matter are really things that I used to think matter that don't, like, yeah, you can wear your Spider-Man costume to school. That's cool. Like, I won't even care if he does that when he's a teenager. Like, do
Right.
you, you know, um, whatever makes, whatever doesn't, it's not like a health issue or a safety issue, then I'm pretty, we'll talk through things sometimes too. I'll make it seem like he's making these decisions or have choice when, okay, that sounds terrible.
No, it doesn't.
But
That sounds
yeah,
strategic.
yeah. So
And I think we have to, as leaders, we have to know the humans we're leading. Some of them need different things than others. And for those that are like afraid that, I'll be worried about what color cup forever, you won't.
yeah,
That won't be the source of their power and control when they're not toddlers, right?
right.
My 11-year-old is at a place now where he can tell me, like, oh, I hate when you change the plans. And he'll say that first, and then he'll kind of regulate a little, and then he'll go, okay, I know it'll be fun. It is different than what I was planning on. And that's a little hard for me. I'm working on being flexible. So I think, and one thing I instituted when they were little, I love when I notice these things that just like intuitively we do, and then later we read it somewhere and we're like, oh, that was apparently like an actual strategy. But what I
Exactly.
used to say to my kids was, it sounds really hard. What's one thing that would make it a little tiny bit easier? Not easy. We're not looking to like change your feelings, but like what would make it tolerable?
Yeah.
And for families with more colorful language, I would be like, oh, that sucks. What would make it suck a little less?
Mm-hmm.
And they thought that was funny because they were all of like 2 and 3. So there was like a match to their energy, and they would really appreciate that.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, one of the times this semi-recently happened, we were going to the botanical gardens. And it wasn't that he didn't want to go. It was the shift in expectation.
Right.
And normally I let him know ahead of time. I guess I forgot. I didn't really think of it. And he felt that resistance in his body. And so he's like working through it. And then he said to me, I bet if I brought my camera, it would feel easier to go, because then I would at least know one thing that I could do while I was there. I'm like, you're kind of a genius.
Wow.
I love you. And it was funny you mentioned the clothing thing. We went on a walk this morning. My 5-year-old wore her pajamas, which is a big zip up creeper footy pajama thing. And my 9-year-old wore a robe over top of his very normal, not pajama clothes. He
Right.
chose to also wear a robe. You do you, boo. Like, I say that so often to them, and it's silly, but it's like, I asked, I'm like, do you want to wear your robe out around in the walk? And he was like, yeah, I like my robe. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. Because is anything going to be harmed by this? No.
Right.
Does this break any family rules or values? No. Like, we're good. And nobody cares. So you're going to see a 9-year-old and be like, oh, must say something to them. No, you're going to go, what a little weirdo. Great. Moving on with life.
Right.
Or you're going to think fondly, because actually that happens more often. I'll get it. If I get any comment, it's somebody who's a little bit older who is like, oh, cherish these moments. They're so beautiful when they're little, and like this passes so fast. That is the most common response I get. Now, I am in Idaho. I feel like people are genuinely nice in the Treasure Valley area. I haven't really left the Treasure Valley area, so I can't speak for the rest of Idaho. But like, I know that maybe isn't everybody's experience. And I know that there is a privilege in having that experience and freedom. And while I do have it, I'm going to make sure my kids enjoy it, because they really are only little ones.
Yeah.
And You know, there are things I'm like, no, I will not let you ride your bike barefoot. I've seen way too many things. Shoes are a must. And now we're mad and you can be mad and I'm still not going to let you ride your bike without helmet and shoes. Those are my rules.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to health and safety, for sure, I'll hold those boundaries. And if it's not a health and safety issue, have fun. So it's interesting how that ends up manifesting with sensitive little kiddos and some of the things that they choose to do. But it's also really sweet to see them take care of themselves because they do it without shame and without guilt. We can learn from these little people.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I was just having a conversation the other day saying how much I love watching my child, who's only 4, like advocate for himself, speak up for what he wants and for what he needs. And even starting to like have the vocabulary around the feelings or what's going on or what he needs, like, you know, I need space, back up, you know, whatever it is. Like, I love it. Whereas, you know, it could be, don't get me wrong, there are times when I get sort of activated or whatever by it. But most of the time, even in those moments, there's this part of me that's just like rejoicing, and I'm so proud to be making this strong little human who's going to be able to take care of himself. And
I want to reassure parents too that like when you're talking about a toddler, they're supposed to be egocentric. The way that they learn how to care about other people is by learning how to advocate for themselves. They're not a brat. You're not raising a terrible human. First, they start here and then they expand out. And it's actually true for us too. If we really love and advocate for ourselves, we accommodate ourselves where it's reasonable, we like listen to our bodies and what we need, we become so much more empathetic and compassionate to other people and their experience and their needs. And it's when we are starving and our needs are not met that we have a really hard time seeing through somebody else's eyes.
Right.
And so it's not a bad thing. It's like, sure, we're going to work on tone. The tone regulation isn't a thing 4-year-olds can do. That part of their brain's not there yet. It's all good. We'll get there. We model that kinder, respectful tone. We translate, oh, you would like some space. I can step back and give you some space. And we show with our actions what it looks like to advocate in the way we want them to advocate. And they do that. That's how they learn everything. They watch us. So like the more that we practice, that little voice of guilt is like, you know, you really should be. Hold on a second. Pause. First of all, we're not going to shit on ourselves. Thank you so much. Secondly, my job is to keep everybody healthy and safe. Right now, what would keep me healthy and safe is taking a break. It is going and taking some rest. Yesterday, I took a bath because we went hiking all day and my body hurt.
Yeah.
And when I do that, I am showing my kids what it looks like to do that. And, you know, if you want to get gender stereotypy, I'm showing my boys, in theory, how to support their future wives, provided it goes that direction, right? I'm showing my daughter what it looks like to advocate for herself within her family and not become the family doormat. These are good things. Yes, it can be hard. And our parts that have learned to protect us by keeping us small and invisible are going to riot.
Right.
And it's worth being a little bit uncomfortable and letting our nervous system, our amygdala fires up and it's like, danger! And then we go, okay, let's just see what happens. And it starts to come down. And we're like, oh, wait, I didn't die. My 9-year-old's perfect at this. He will do exactly that. He'll be like, oh, it's going to be so scary. It's going to be so scary. It's going to be so scary. And then he'll do it and he'll go, I didn't die. And I just love this embodiment of this practice and challenging himself. It was monkey bars yesterday. He's like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And then he did it. He's like, I didn't die. He knows he can do monkey bars. But that really does apply to all of the hard things that we learn to do for ourselves. And that ripple effect that impacts our families, but also other moms in our community, other people who see, oh, like there is a way to be where it's okay to just be me.
Yeah.
Is it weird that I have to wear earplugs at a movie theater? I don't care because that is what I need to enjoy the movie. And the end, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that the more that we talk about it, the more we normalize it and the more that we do it for ourselves, the more that other people can talk about it and normalize it and do it for themselves. And then we just really create a more compassionate world. So I'm on board.
Absolutely. I love all of that. And I think, yeah, just having it is, I think that practice of self-compassion or not shaming ourselves and just like allowing, like giving ourselves space and grace to, for whatever is occurring.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And your kids are so blessed to have you. What a beautiful, like, you're modeling all of these wonderful life skills
Well, thank you.
and
And
human
for you.
skills. Oh, well, thank you.
I know that you work with HSPs. So for anybody in your area, what options do they have? I think you were talking at one point about doing some work outside of clinical work, right?
Yeah. So I'm actually in, um, I had planned to launch it last month or this month or so February, but I'll be launching a program that I've created, a 12-week program for highly sensitive people and empaths,
That's awesome.
to essentially break through chronic anxiety and create a more a life of more relaxed calm. So both in your personal lives, having those relationships professionally or personally that are more harmonious. And so much of it, it starts with you.
Yeah.
So the program is really a blend of, it's not a like one size fits all. I've got structure to it, but it's going to be uniquely tailored to each person, which is
Choose
just
your own adventure.
love. Yeah.
I love it.
And
It's
it'll blend like external strategies with the internal work that comes from. So it's a coaching program or mentorship program,
right.
but I'll be bringing my therapeutic hat and skills to the work as
I love
well.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds incredible.
Oh,
Um, One more question because it popped into my brain. Do you think that artists or artistic people are more likely to be HSPs?
And yeah, and there. So Elaine Aron speaks about that in her books as well, about that,
Mm,
the more like, how would she say? We're just wired for more something to do with the brain and creativity and seeing our perception, the way being open to. Oh gosh, none of these sentences are coming out. Well, short answer, yes. So,
I
but
feel that. Like I look at different art and there is just this outpouring of emotion. And it can be so intense and so impactful and so moving. And I'm actually looking at your pot behind you, and it was like making me think about like the way that people create. Like, oh, I just love it. And you know, if that's one of those gifts, like yeah, there is hard things about being an HSP, but is there a place where those gifts really get to shine too?
yeah,
Um, it makes me think of that, and I guess I'm wondering if your program includes any of the art approaches for folks that maybe want to tap into that but never really had a background in it.
I love that you're asking that because I've recently been like, I haven't really incorporated the art, the creative or like art therapy piece in there, but I feel like it's going to come in here somewhere. But I haven't consciously put that in there. Although there are some elements, so I use some different sort of visualization techniques. There are some elements that are, it's like art therapy in the brain, like
That's so cool.
creatively using imagery and shifting imagery in your head.
Yeah.
But like the physical, tactile part of art, I've wondered about ways to incorporate that, or even just depending on who comes to me, if they're inclined.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I wonder even if there was a paid art workshop that led into your course. Right? So
Mm.
you start with a specific project. You're going to learn how to do this project when you're feeling really anxious or some, I don't know. I'm not an art therapist, but whatever. Right. And then towards the end of it, like there's also this full 12-week course that will really help you develop the whole range of tools to support yourself as an HSP. That's what's coming to my brain.
Thank you for sharing that. Now you've got my brain going.
Yeah, that's my favorite. I love collaboration. We actually got a comment. Sorry, I missed the last 5 to 10 minutes due to my own little one waking up. Where do you see the difference or boundary between autism and HSP? Not the historical definition and understanding of autism, but what we are learning now about autism and the diversity of presentations and experiences, IG, highly empathetic autistic people. So much that has been mentioned is the same as many autistic parents experience in themselves and or their autistic children, IG, sensory overwhelm, stimming, control, and then StreamYard cuts off the comment, so there was more. But I think we understand that because we've actually had this conversation before. So take it away.
Yes, because we both want to know the answer to that question as well. And I've been doing a deep dive, and because of the more just understanding and research and the shifting of the definition or around autism. And there are some folks who will say that they are the same thing. Mm-hmm. They're the exact same thing, just different words. And then there are some folks, I think the majority, who would actually say they're different with some nuances. Mm-hmm. You could be one or both. And I don't have a really good answer to this because, so Elaine Aron speaks about some of the ways she's distinguished the difference. For example, the one that comes to mind, which of course does not apply to every person with autism, but she speaks to in general, like social communication or what's the word? So, for example, highly sensitive people are pretty adept at attuning to people, understanding the nonverbal communications, like maybe intuitively, even knowing or empathically knowing what's going on, what's wanted, or what is being felt by the other person. Mm-hmm. Whereas she said, some folks who have autism might have difficulty with social cues or reading other people or knowing how to communicate or what to communicate or mm-hmm. So
and I wonder too for Rachel here, like she's talking about how this experience is evolving, and I recently saw an autistic woman talking about it's not that I don't have empathy, it's not that I can't right. tell what you're going for, it's that your social hierarchy rules are stupid and I'm not participating.
I like
and I was like, I love that. And I do wonder, yes, it's one of the diagnostic criteria, as I understand, is kind of a inability or a lowered ability for that skill set, particularly by age, right? But I do wonder sometimes if a person is both, right? If they are autistic and highly sensitive, does that then lead to that experience of like, oh no, I know exactly what you're wanting, but you're game playing and I'm not participating.
Yeah.
I've seen it in my family. And it's very funny because it's like, I actually, gosh, I don't think I can share that story, but I've seen it and it makes me wonder about that overlap as well. But I know that you had talked about folks who very clearly meet every criteria for HSP, but then don't really meet all the criteria right. for autism.
And that's where, in like full transparency, a lot of my wanting to deep dive into this is because I've been questioning, am I also autistic? Mm-hmm. Is my son also autistic? We're most definitely highly sensitive because mm-hmm. like all the criteria. But the other part, and then it's also, does it really matter? Yeah. But my brain wants to know, and my brain wants to share the correct information.
Yes.
So but there's debate even in my groups, my colleague therapists, mm-hmm. other areas, there's debate around that. And I think, and I have several HSP therapists, friends and colleagues who have discovered that, oh, I am also autistic,
Yeah.
So, and I realized that I was doing a lot of masking, or
which females tend to do more of.
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier in this podcast, Dr. Tay, her podcast I just checked is Evolve with Dr. Tay. And she has talked a little bit about HSPs and autism, and particularly autism in females, because it is different and it doesn't, if you're looking at the point blank diagnostic criteria, it doesn't always fit. But if you look at kind of like the spirit of the diagnostic criteria and how it then impacts and affects females, it is a lot broader application. And I find that to be really fascinating discussion. As a neurodivergent human, I tick every ADHD box. So I'm good with that diagnosis I received. But, you know, I don't know, like 4 of my friends over the past 10 years have been ADHD forever. And then they're like, I was actually also autistic. Yeah. And it's, they've continuously asked me, and I'm like, I don't think so. But there is so many pieces that can be really similar. And then let's throw a massive monkey wrench in, because trauma mirrors all of it. And so, possibly less so with autism, but with ADHD, like some of the symptoms and then also of like trauma responses are real similar. And then with empath, right? So I had that identifier from like a really long time. Okay. And then I had learned about how trauma can kind of grow the amygdala, make you hypersensitive to other people's nervous systems, and that empathness can be a trauma response. And I was like, oh, lovely. I mean, I like being an empath, but also, what does that even mean anymore? It's been a wild ride trying to understand all this. And I think that the bottom line is we don't know it all yet. And we're probably not going to in our lifetime. I think our understanding is going to continue to evolve. My goal for myself is to keep being open, keep learning, listen to humans who have lived experiences that are different than mine, and they are sharing. And I'm so grateful to hear what life is like for them and their bodies. Trust that people are really doing their best. And if they tell me they need some sort of accommodation, do my best to make that accommodation, and continue to learn myself and my body and my processes. And, you know, the things that remain as I have continued my healing, I'm like, those are probably more like me things than trauma things. And thus far, all of the ADHD and even the HSP stuff, I'm like, it's all still there. It's probably pretty stuck. You know, but it's an interesting question. It's good to talk about. And I think I would never look at an autistic person who's telling me they're autistic and go, no, you're just HSP. Right. Or vice versa. I wouldn't look at an HSP and be like, you're probably autistic. I think it matters more what that person's experience of themselves is in their life, and wherever they're comfortable landing, if that's the definition that's going to be most supportive of them, right, I'm good with that. Absolutely. So this is also why I'm not a diagnostician. So
yeah, and I really don't care to diagnose, and I don't necessarily like to put labels, but I think it's so important to, especially when, because I just think it can be so helpful, and having a framework and an understanding, and okay, well, this is what I get to, so we could have a whole discussion about that, but
I know,
I just, like you said, we don't have all the answers, and things will continue to unfold.
Awesome. She replied, thanks for the reply. My own view is they are the same and likely just different preferences for labels and different profiles. I think one of the reasons it could be helpful to explore is so HSP and some autistic people can share resources and support. Totally agree with that. Since the experiences overlap. My own observation has also been similar to what you said regarding trauma and or gender. I am also fully agree with using whatever label works for you. Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate your comments and participating in our conversation here.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So I think that this is a really amazing, impactful conversation. I have a feeling that you'll be back, because I think that this type of conversation applies to a lot of the members of our communities and the members that overlap in our communities. I also would really love to share your program once it officially launches, because I just think there's so many people who can really use that lens of approaching from the lens of highly sensitive people, honoring our nervous systems, being aware of the differences that we might need to incorporate in our approach, that are outside of the standard typical box. And
Right.
that's okay. In fact, I think that's great. I like diversity and difference, and
Yeah.
I think that it makes our lives richer. So thank
Thank you
you
so
for this.
much.
I've enjoyed this, and it has been interesting, is what Rachel is adding.
Wonderful. I
So,
love it.
but thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for inviting me back. I would love to come back sometime because I just love conversing with you about all of this. It's just, yeah, I think both of our brains love diving into this sort of thing and helping those we can, and normalizing their experience. And yeah, so thank you for being a support, and I'll continue to advocate for you because you've been, I can't tell you the number of people in groups that I've been like, with that question, I know who you need to go ask. You're going to get a really great answer.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. I really appreciate it. All
Yeah.
right. We have hit an hour, so
Yeah.
we have a lot to say, and I love it. So I will call it for today. That will be it for this episode. But we will be back because I do think there's more and more that can be said. I think it could be really cool to do an episode specifically on, art approaches that you have found really cathartic or soothing. Partly selfishly because there's a couple that I've done that I was surprised by really enjoying. And I would just, like to chit chat about that. Also, of course, for people to try at home. And just another iteration of like, you don't have to be good at something to do it badly. Who cares? Like,
and that's one thing as an art therapist, we tell everyone, like, you don't have to be good at art. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have to know anything about art. That's not what it's about. It's about tapping into your own creative self, and we're all inherently creative. So
I love it. I love it so much. You're amazing. I love your work. I'm so grateful you're in this world, and I can't wait to chat again. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sammy.
I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.